Hey everyone. So, I've seen a lot of stories on Reddit, a lot of people spilling their guts about messed up family stuff. And honestly, it's always made me feel a little less alone. Because for the longest time, I thought what happened to me, what my parents did, was just, well, it was something I couldn't even put into words. It was embarrassing, it was infuriating, and it felt like they systematically dismantled my life, piece by piece, all while looking like the perfect, loving family from the outside. You know, the kind of family that gets featured in local papers for their community involvement, or sends out those perfectly curated holiday cards. Yeah, that was us. My name is Chloe. And if you asked anyone who knew my family growing up, our neighbors, my teachers, even some of my extended relatives, they'd tell you we were the picture of suburban perfection. My mom, Eleanor, was this effortlessly elegant woman, always impeccably dressed, volunteering at school events, baking amazing cookies for fundraisers, hosting the most charming garden parties. My dad, Richard, was a sharp, successful corporate lawyer, always impeccably dressed, drove a shiny European car, and could schmooze anyone from the PTA president to a senior partner at his firm. We lived in a beautiful, sprawling house in one of the most desirable neighborhoods, had annual family vacations to places that made other kids' eyes widen. Think ski trips to Aspen, summer breaks in Tuscany. My younger brother Ben and I, we were always well-behaved, high-achieving kids. We were the straight-A students, the polite ones, the ones who seemed to have it all together. Seriously, we were the kind of family other parents probably pointed to, like, why can't you be more like the Millers? It was a whole thing. A carefully constructed facade, one that took years to even begin to crack. But behind those polished doors, it was different. Not abusive in the way you might think. No screaming matches, no physical altercations, no blatant neglect. It was far more insidious, more psychological. It was about control, absolute, suffocating, all-encompassing control, disguised as love, concern, and the pursuit of excellence. From day one, it felt like my life was less about me and more about fulfilling their expectations. My grades had to be perfect. Not just good, but perfect. A. B was a catastrophe, a full-blown family crisis that would result in days of silent treatment, disappointed sighs, and discussions about my potential not being met. Forget about exploring hobbies unless they somehow contributed to my future college applications or enhanced the family image. Art? Music? Sports? Only if I showed elite potential early on and it looked good on a resume. I remember once, when I was about 10, I wanted to join the school drama club. Just for fun, you know? I loved acting, loved the idea of being someone else for a bit, escaping into a story. My mom sat me down, very calmly, with a cup of chamomile tea, and said, "Chloe, darling, drama club is sweet, but it won't get you into a top-tier university. What about debate club? That looks excellent on a Harvard application, and think of the public speaking skills you'll develop." Harvard. At 10. It was baffling. It wasn't just academics. It was everything. Who my friends were, they were vetted, subtly or not so subtly. If a friend wasn't from a good family, or wasn't also a high achiever, my parents would make snide comments, question their influence, or simply make it difficult for me to spend time with them. What I wore, my mom always had to approve my outfits, often choosing them herself. What I ate, they were strict about nutrition, but it felt less about health and more about maintaining a certain image of discipline. How I spent my allowance, every dollar had to be accounted for, justified. They'd constantly monitor my calls, check my browser history, even read my journals sometimes, claiming it was for my own good, to keep me safe from bad influences. "We just want you to make good choices, Chloe. We love you too much to let you stumble." If I ever pushed back, even slightly, it wasn't a fight in the traditional sense. It was a cold, silent disapproval that felt worse than any shouting. My mom would just get this look on her face, like I'd deeply wounded her, like I'd betrayed her unwavering devotion. She'd say things in a soft, trembling voice like, "After everything we do for you, the sacrifices we make, the opportunities we provide, this is how you repay us? This is how you show your gratitude?" Or my dad would give a long, condescending lecture about maturity, making responsible choices, and understanding the real world. It was pure emotional manipulation, a steady drip, drip, drip of guilt and obligation, And as a kid, you just internalize that. You start to believe that you are the problem, that you are ungrateful or selfish for wanting your own space, your own thoughts, your own identity. It's a classic gaslighting technique designed to make you question your own perceptions and desires. I started to believe that my happiness was secondary to their vision for my life. That's a heavy burden for a kid. When it came time for college applications, that's when things really started to spiral, and the pressure became unbearable. My dream, my true passion, was to study literature. I loved stories, loved analyzing them, loved the idea of spending my life immersed in books, maybe becoming a writer or a teacher. I devoured novels, spent hours in libraries, and felt a profound connection to the worlds words could create. But my parents? They had other, much more practical plans. For them, literature translated to unemployed barista living in a cramped apartment. They wanted me to be a lawyer, like my dad. Chloe, darling, you're so smart, so articulate. You'd be brilliant in law. The stability, the prestige, the financial security. Think of the opportunities. I tried to argue. I really did. I brought up my passion, my interest, my desire to pursue something that truly ignited my soul. They dismissed it with a polite but firm wave of a hand. That's a hobby, sweetie, something you do on the weekends for enjoyment, not a career path. They insisted I apply only to a very select list of top-tier universities, specifically targeting those with strong pre-law programs and impressive alumni networks. They took over the entire application process. They filled out most of the forms themselves, often dictating my answers. They wrote large parts of my essays, ensuring they highlighted all the right things: my leadership skills, my volunteer work, which they also heavily influenced, my perfect grades, not necessarily things that were authentically me or reflected my true aspirations. They even extensively coached me for interviews, telling me exactly what to say, how to sit, how to smile, how to answer tricky questions about my future ambitions. It felt like I was a puppet, performing for them, my voice and desires completely erased. I ended up getting into a pretty prestigious university, one of their top choices. I got a partial scholarship, which was a relief, but tuition was still insane, a staggering amount of money even with the scholarship. My parents, being the generous and supportive parents they were, assured me, "Don't worry about a thing, sweetheart, we'll handle it. Your job is to focus on your studies and get that law degree. We've got your back." I was so relieved. I wasn't thrilled about law, but at least I wouldn't be buried in debt, right? That was the big promise, the golden ticket. First year of college was a total blur of stress and misery. Pre-law was not for me. I hated the classes, the cutthroat environment, the dry, endless readings. I felt like I was drowning, constantly exhausted, mentally drained, and secretly resentful. While other freshmen were exploring new interests, joining clubs, and making genuine connections, I was holed up in the library, grinding through textbooks I despised, feeling a profound sense of emptiness. Socially, I struggled too. It was hard to connect with people when I felt like I was living a lie, pursuing a path that wasn't mine. I tried to talk to my parents about switching majors, maybe to something like English or communications, something I might actually enjoy, something that might light a spark within me. Their reaction? Fury. Not outright screaming, but the chilling silent treatment that lasted for days, the disappointed sighs that could deflate a hot air balloon, the endless lectures about wasting opportunities, throwing away our investment. How dare you disrespect our sacrifices? My dad even used the word entitled. They even threatened to pull funding completely if I didn't stick to the plan. We're not paying for you to indulge in some frivolous hobby, Chloe. This is serious. I was trapped, utterly and completely trapped, caught between my dwindling spirit and the fear of being financially cut off and deemed a failure by the very people who were supposed to be my safe harbor. But here's where the real mess started, and where the embarrassing secrets come into play. See, my parents were obsessed with appearances. They drove luxury cars, lived in a multi-million-dollar house, took lavish, Instagram-perfect vacations to exotic locales. They threw elaborate parties, belonged to the most exclusive country clubs, but they were living beyond their means, way beyond. My dad's law practice, while seemingly successful and bringing in a decent income, was apparently not quite as lucrative or stable as they let on. And my mom's volunteering was mostly about maintaining social status and networking, not about genuine charity. They were bleeding money, and the facade was starting to crack, even if only subtly. I started to get little clues, tiny red flags I didn't fully understand at the time. A credit card bill that came to my name at the dorm, even though I hadn't opened it. A seemingly innocent call from a loan company asking to confirm details with me, not my parents, which I just brushed off, thinking it was a clerical error. My dad always seemed agitated when talking about finances, even though he was a lawyer. My mom would get this tense look if anyone asked about their investment portfolio. Then, in my second year of college, I received a more pointed email from the financial aid office. It wasn't a standard form, it was a query about some specific details regarding private student loans. I thought it was just standard paperwork, something they needed me to sign off on. But when I looked closer, I saw a string of private student loans, not federal ones, and they were huge. The total amount was staggering, way more than I remembered being discussed for my tuition, even with my partial scholarship. I vaguely remembered signing some papers quickly when I was rushing off to a class, my mom saying, "Just initial here, sweetie, it's boring paperwork. We'll explain later." But they never did. When I confronted them about it, my dad got defensive, even angry. "It's just part of the financial planning, Chloe. You wouldn't understand. It's how wealthy people manage their assets, how they structure their debt for tax purposes." My mom quickly chimed in with her practiced, calm smile. "We're doing this for your future. Darling, you'll thank us when you're a successful lawyer. It's simply smart financing." But something felt profoundly off. The excuses were too smooth, too rehearsed. I decided to dig deeper, quietly. I contacted the financial aid office again, then the loan companies directly. I asked for all the documentation that had my name on it. And what I found out, well, it was a gut punch. A literal physical sensation of nausea and cold dread. My parents had taken out these massive private loans in my name, with me as the primary borrower, without ever fully explaining the terms or involving me in the process. Beyond getting my signature on vague forms, they'd pressure me to sign quickly. They'd told me they were co-signing with me, implying they were equally responsible. But the truth was, they had structured it so that if anything went wrong, or if they just decided to walk away, the full burden would fall squarely on my shoulders. And the most shocking, the most infuriating part, they had been secretly siphoning off a significant portion of the loan money for their own expenses. Not just my tuition, but for their extravagant lifestyle. They were using my education, my future, as their personal piggy bank. They'd make small minimum payments on the loans to keep them current, but they were letting the principal balloon, using the funds to prop up their failing image. It was a huge, elaborate scheme, built entirely on my trust and my youthful naivety. The embarrassing secret for them was their precarious financial instability, their desperate need to maintain a facade of wealth, and the morally bankrupt lengths they would go to preserve it. The embarrassing secret for me was that I, a seemingly smart, capable young woman who had been trained for excellence, had been so utterly blind, so completely manipulated by the very people who were supposed to protect and nurture me. I felt like such an idiot, so gullible, so completely outmaneuvered. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have been so blind? But then my therapist, years later, helped me understand. It wasn't stupidity, it was the ingrained habit of trust, warped by years of emotional conditioning and the profound belief that your parents always have your best interests at heart. That's a hard belief to shake, even when the evidence is staring you in the face. I was 20 years old, and I was staring at hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt that wasn't even fully for my education, debt that I was solely responsible for. And all of it for a degree I hated. My parents had destroyed my life in the most practical, soul-crushing way possible. They hadn't just dictated my career path, they had shackled me to it with financial chains that felt unbreakable. I finished college barely. The last year was a blur of anxiety attacks and tearful nights. I got a job at a big corporate law firm because I had to. The debt was crushing. Every day was a grind. I'd wake up feeling a sense of profound dread, spend my days doing work I despised, navigating a competitive environment that felt hostile, and come home utterly exhausted, only to stare at loan statements that seemed to laugh in my face. My parents, meanwhile, were utterly oblivious. or pretended to be. They'd brag about my brilliant lawyer daughter to their friends, completely ignoring the hollowed-out shell of a person I had become. They'd ask if I'd gotten a promotion or if I was meeting any nice lawyers to date. If I ever brought up the debt or my profound unhappiness, it was the same old song and dance. "You're ungrateful, Chloe. We gave you everything. This is what success looks like. Just stick with it. It'll get easier." It never did. It took me years of therapy, years of struggling to pay down that monstrous debt, years of slowly rebuilding my sense of self to truly understand what had happened. I wasn't ungrateful. I was a victim of emotional and financial abuse, plain and simple. They hadn't set out to destroy my life out of malice, perhaps, but out of their own deep-seated insecurities, their own desperate need to maintain appearances and control. They used me as an extension of themselves, a trophy to validate their own perceived success, and they didn't care about the cost to me. The massive blow-up finally happened about 5 years after I graduated. I was at my wit's end. The debt, the job, the constant emotional drain of dealing with my parents' expectations, it all culminated one Thanksgiving. My dad, after a few too many drinks, started loudly boasting to a visiting relative about how they had generously paid for all of Chloe's education. Something just snapped inside me. I stood up, my voice shaking but firm, and I laid it all out. Every single detail of the loans, how they were structured, how they'd used my money, how I was still buried in debt for a career I hated. I told them about the years of misery, the emotional manipulation, the feeling of being trapped. Their reaction was exactly what you'd expect from people like them. My dad got defensive, then angry, accusing me of being ungrateful and dramatic. My mom burst into tears, saying I was breaking her heart and ruining the holidays. There was no real apology, no genuine understanding of the trauma they inflicted. Just deflection, blame, and further emotional manipulation. It was painful, but also incredibly liberating. It was the moment I truly understood that they were never going to change, never going to admit their wrongdoings. And that was okay, because I finally understood it. My relationship with them now, it's complicated, to say the least. After that blow-up, I pulled back significantly. I still see them for major holidays, but it's superficial. I don't share details about my life beyond the most basic pleasantries. I don't trust them with anything important, any vulnerabilities. It's a sad reality to have such a fractured relationship with your own parents, but it's a necessary boundary for my own mental health. It's about protecting myself, finally. Ben, my younger brother, eventually figured out some of what happened. I started talking about it more openly, and he saw how much I struggled. He had a somewhat different experience, perhaps less pressure, because I was the test run and they learned a little from my struggle. Or maybe because his personality was less prone to their specific manipulations. He's been incredibly supportive, which helps. He sees it now, the cracks in the facade, and it's given him a different perspective on our upbringing. I'm still paying off those loans, slowly but surely. It's a heavy burden, a constant reminder of what happened, but I eventually found the courage to leave law. It was terrifying to walk away from a stable, high-paying job, especially with that debt hanging over my head. But I started freelancing, writing, doing things I loved, slowly building a portfolio. And now I'm working in a nonprofit organization focused on literacy programs, something that genuinely makes me happy and feels incredibly meaningful, even if it means a smaller paycheck. It's been a long, painful journey, rebuilding my life from the ground up, finding my own voice, my own purpose, and my own definition of success. And it's not always easy to share this story because there's still that lingering shame, that little voice in my head that says, "You should have known better, Chloe. You should have been stronger, smarter." But then I read stories on Reddit, stories of people dealing with similar toxic family dynamics, similar invisible chains, and I realize I'm not alone. And the shame isn't mine to carry. It belongs to them, the ones who chose control and facade over genuine love and support, the ones who valued appearances over their child's well-being. So if you're out there feeling like your parents, or anyone close to you, are pulling the strings of your life, trapping you in a narrative that isn't yours, remember this: your life is yours. Your dreams are valid, and you deserve to live a life that makes you happy, that aligns with your values, not one that makes someone else look good or fulfills their unmet desires. It takes immense courage to break free, to challenge those deeply ingrained patterns, to confront the people who shaped you. It's messy, it's hard, and it takes time. But it's absolutely, unequivocally worth it. Every single step. That's the story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The next story will be about my friend.